Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk about dermatosis of pregnancy. I'll also be discussing approach to a pregnant woman with pruritus. So let's get started. If you guys are visiting my channel for the first time, my name is Dr. Namra Aziz. I'm resident dermatology. I make a lot of educational content. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to get notification. Also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Namra Aziz. A pregnant woman with severe pruritus needs immediate assessment because of the risk of the fetal involvement. So a pregnant woman comes to you with pruritus. First of all, you have to examine the skin and see if the patient has primary skin lesions or does not have any skin lesions. Secondly, you have to check in which trimester the patient is in. But at every point, it's very important to notice if the skin lesions are explainable by any other disorder such as P. rosea, scabies, urticaria, or any other viral exanthem. If the patient presents before the third trimester and lesions are predominantly involving the trunk and limbs, most likely the diagnosis is atopic eruption of pregnancy. If the patient has a late onset disease and is presenting in the third trimester or postpartum and lesions are predominantly located on the abdomen, most likely the diagnosis is polymorphic eruption of pregnancy or pemphigoid gestationis. I will be talking about all of these one by one. Now, if any primary skin lesions are not present, always think about intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. On examination, you will find only secondary skin lesions due to scratching, for example, excoriations or prurigo. Now let's start with the group where skin lesions are involving the abdomen predominantly. I'll start with the pemphigoid gestationis. First of all, we all should know what is pemphigoid gestationis. Pemphigoid gestationis is a rare pruritic vesiculovillous eruption that develops during the late pregnancy or the immediate postpartum period. It is one of the most characterized dermatoses of pregnancy and the only one that may also affect the skin of the newborn. Now, who gets pemphigoid gestationis? There has been a genetic predisposition because of the association of the disease with HLA-DR3 and HLA-DR4. While occurring primarily during pregnancy and immediate postpartum period, pemphigoid gestationis has rarely developed in association with trophoblastic tumors such as hydatidiform mole and choriocarcinoma. Interestingly, no case has been reported in men with choriocarcinoma. I'll talk about this in a while. Pemphigoid gestationis is an autoimmune disease. Historically, pemphigoid gestationis was thought to be caused by an anti-basement membrane serum factor, which was called as herpes gestationis factor. Now we know that this serum factor is a complement-fixing autoantibody of Ig1 subclass directed against 180 kilodalton transmembrane hemidesmosable protein, which is also called as bullous pemphigoid antigen 2 or collagen 17. On the bullous pemphigoid antigen 2 or bullous pemphigoid antigen 180, these antibodies are exclusively directed against its one of the domain, which is the non-collagenous domain of the bullous pemphigoid 180 called as NC16A domain. Some studies demonstrate that the antibodies are also produced against some other epitopes on bullous pemphigoid antigen 180, but mostly exclusively antibodies against the bullous pemphigoid antigen 180 NC16A domain are detected. It's important to understand here that this bullous pemphigoid antigen and the NC16A domain are the same, which are the antigens in the bullous pemphigoid. Now, why would someone develop these antibodies? In a genetically predisposed individual with HLA-DR3 and HLA-DR4, it has been postulated that MHC2 antigen from the father's side found on the chorionic villi act as an unknown antigen to the body of the mother. The body produces antibodies against it. In addition to binding to chorionic villi and amniotic epithelium, these antibodies cross-react with the basement membrane zone of the skin and cause the maternal skin disease, and when passed on to the newborn, cause the newborn disease. So in pemphigoid gestationis, the primary site of autoimmunity seems to be placenta, as antibodies bind not only to the basement membrane zone of the epidermis of the skin, but also to the basement membrane zone of chorionic and amniotic epithelia. Now, like I said before, in addition to the pregnancy and postpartum, pemphigoid gestationis has also been reported with choriocarcinoma in women. But it does not occur in choriocarcinoma in men. Why it is so? It is because the choriocarcinoma in the woman is of the placental origin, and the antigens on the placenta, which is MHC2 antigen, act as a foreign particle against which antibodies are produced. However, the choriocarcinoma in the men is of testicular origin and has same genetic material as of the body, so it is not recognized as a foreign antigen and antibodies are not produced against it. Unlike MHC antigens on the placenta, which are from the father's side and act as a foreign particle in the mother's body, hence antibodies are produced against them. Like I said before, disease usually presents in the last, that is third trimester or postpartum. Now, how does the disease present? There is an abrupt onset of cutaneous lesions on the trunk, in particularly abdomen, and often within or immediately adjacent to the umbilicus. Rapid progression to a generalized pemphigoid-like eruption then occurs, with pruritic urticarial papules and plaques, followed by the clustered herpetiform vesicles or tense bulla on an erythematous base. The eruption may involve the entire body, sparing only the mucous membrane. While the clinical presentation and course may vary considerably, spontaneous improvement during late gestation is common. This is followed, however, by a flare at the time of delivery in 75% of the patients. Such flares may be dramatic with an explosive onset of blistering within hours. Most disease activity spontaneously remits during the weeks to months following delivery, but there are isolated reports of a protracted course postpartum. Flares or recurrences in association with menstruation are common, and in 25 to 50% of the patients, they may also be induced by oral contraceptives. Pemphigoid gestations may not develop during the first pregnancy, but once established, it is quite likely to recur in subsequent pregnancy, usually with an earlier onset and more severe course. Skip pregnancies have been observed in 5 to 8% of the women. There seems to be an increased risk of prematurity and small for gestational age neonates, presumably due to the chronic placental insufficiency, because the antibodies, like I said before, also deposit on the chorionic villi. Recently, it was shown that this fetal risk correlates with the disease severity, that is, occurrence of blistering and early onset disease, and not with the use of the systemic corticosteroids. Approximately 10% of newborns develop mild skin involvement due to passive transfer of maternal antibodies, and this resolves spontaneously within days to weeks. Classical histological finding of subepidermal blister is seen in the minority of patients. Instead, a non-specific mixed cellular infiltrate containing a variable number of eosinophils is more common. The presence of eosinophil is the most consistent histological feature of pemphigoid gestationis. When direct immunofluorescence on the perilesional skin is performed, linear deposition of C3 and IgG is seen. The essential component for the diagnosis of pemphigoid gestationis is the linear deposition of C3 along the basement membrane zone of the perilesional skin by direct immunofluorescence microscopy. This is observed in 100% of the patient, and the linear deposition of IgG is seen only in the 30% of the patient. When salt skin split specimens are employed for the conventional indirect immunofluorescence, deposition of IgG along the bottom of the epidermal fragment is observed in 30% of the patients. Determination of antibody titers against BP180 NC16A by ELISA may be helpful in following the disease activity and monitoring therapy. Can we use BP180 NC16A antibodies alone to diagnose pemphigoid gestationis? The test is sensitive and specific for the diagnosis of pemphigoid gestationis. Its sensitivity and specificity ranges between 96 to 100%. Its positivity can be considered diagnostic in patients with typical clinical features. The most frequent differential diagnoses are polymorphic eruption of pregnancy and drug eruption. Polymorphic eruption of pregnancy is a challenging exclusion, given the difficulty of distinguishing polymorphic eruption of pregnancy and urticarial lesions of pemphigoid gestationis. I'll talk about their differentiating point when I'll be done discussing polymorphic eruption of pregnancy. Now let's talk about the treatment of pemphigoid gestationis. For pruritus, first generation chlorpheniramine or second generation loratadine or cetrizine can be used. The primary goal in treating this self-limited disease is to relieve the pruritus and suppress blister formation. In mild cases, the use of potent topical corticosteroids combined with emollients and systemic antihistamines may be adequate. However, systemic corticosteroids remain the cornerstone of the treatment. Most patients respond to 0.5 mg per kg of prednisolone per day. The dose is tapered as soon as the blister formation is suppressed. The common flare associated with delivery usually require a temporary increase in dosage. Those rare patients with refractory disease may benefit from plasmapheresis during pregnancy. Persistent disease after delivery is uncommon and is treated like bullous pemphigoid. Severe persistent postpartum pemphigoid gestationis requires up to 2 mg per kg per day of steroids until clinical remission is achieved, and then tapered and maintained at the lowest effective dose. Anecdotal alternatives to corticosteroids such as dapsone, doxycycline or minocycline plus minus nicotinamide, pyridoxine, cyclosporin or adjuvants such as methotrexate, cyclophosphamide, gold and IVIG have been tried. None of these medications, with the possible exception of cyclosporin, are safe prior to term and thus should be avoided. Polymorphic eruption of pregnancy, formerly known as pruritic urticarial papules and plaques of pregnancy, is a common gestational dermatosis. It is characterized by a typical clinical presentation, normal laboratory tests, and a negative immunofluorescence or ELISA. Who gets polymorphic eruption of pregnancy? It is seen predominantly in primary parous women and tends not to recur in subsequent pregnancy. There is neither an autoimmune diathesis nor an association with an HLA type. All of these are differentiating points from pemphigoid gestationis. Why would someone develop polymorphic eruption of pregnancy? Well, the pathogenesis of polymorphic eruption of pregnancy is unknown. The degree of stretching of abdominal wall may play a role. Polymorphic eruption of pregnancy is more common in the women with excessive stretching, especially in a woman with multiple gestation, that is, those women who are carrying more than one baby. It has been suggested that stretching may cause damage to the connective tissue, which results in the exposure of dermal antigen that trigger an inflammatory response, resulting in the initial appearance of the eruption of the lesions within the stria. The lesions then become generalized as the inflammatory response develops cross-reactivity to the collagen in other normal appearing skin. Immune tolerance during the subsequent pregnancy might prevent recurrence. Additional theories include increased level of progesterone in association with the multiple gestations. Peripheral chimerism has also been suggested as one of the reasons for developing polymorphic eruption of pregnancy. Peripheral chimerism means that the fetal DNA circulates through a mother circulation throughout the pregnancy. Fetal male DNA has been detected in the skin lesions of polymorphic eruption of pregnancy. Onset is most often during the later part of third trimester in 85% of the cases, or in the immediate postpartum period in remaining 15% of the patients. How does a patient with polymorphic eruption of pregnancy presents? Pruritic erythematous and edematous papules and plaques usually first appear within the abdominal striae, typically sparing the periumbilical region, in contrast to the pemphigoid gestationis. The eruption typically spreads over a matter of days, but in general spares the face, palms and sole. While pruritic urticarial papules are the initial lesion in almost all the patients, approximately half will develop polymorphic features as the disease evolves, including widespread eczema, target lesions, tiny vesicles, and eczematous plaques. Irrespective of whether the eruption starts during pregnancy or postpartum, lesions resolve over an average of 4 weeks. Occurrences are unusual except for subsequent multiple gestation pregnancies. There is no associated fetal risk and the patients do not develop neonatal disease. What will you see on the histopathology of polymorphic eruption of pregnancy? Skin biopsy specimens reveal non-specific findings. Epidermal changes vary from the modest spongiosis to acanthosis with hyperkeratosis and parakeratosis, depending upon the stage of the disease. The dermis shows a non-specific perivascular lymphocytic infiltrate with a variable degree of dermal edema and a variable number of neutrophils or eosinophils. Early lesions may resemble arthropod bite reaction with a deeper dermal infiltrate and an absence of an epidermal changes. Due to severe epidermal spongiosis or dermal edema, microvesiculation can appear. Direct immunofluorescence reveals no relevant abnormality and indirect immunofluorescence is negative. Routine laboratory evaluation is normal. Since the lesions of polymorphic eruption of pregnancy may show microvesiculation, contact dermatitis should be considered as a differential diagnosis. Drug eruptions, urticaria, or viral exanthems may also be in the clinical differential diagnosis. The most important entity to exclude is the urticarial pemphigoid gestationis. Clinically and histologically, they are indistinguishable. Lesions of polymorphic eruption of pregnancy begin in the stria, while those of pemphigoid gestationis begin in the periumbilical region. DIF is positive in pemphigoid gestationis, while it's negative in polymorphic eruption of pregnancy. Furthermore, circulating levels of BP180 and C16A can be detected in pemphigoid gestationis. Now let's talk about the treatment of polymorphic eruption of pregnancy. The goal of the treatment is to relieve symptoms. Mid to high potency topical corticosteroids are suggested as an initial therapy for polymorphic eruption of pregnancy. The safety of the topical corticosteroid used during pregnancy is supported by several observational studies and meta-analyses. However, the use of potent or superpotent corticosteroids exceeding 300 grams during the whole pregnancy may be associated with an increased risk of low birth weight. In severe cases, a short course of systemic corticosteroids with a quick taper, such as prednisone or prednisolone 0.5 mg per kg per day for 1 week, tapered over 1 to 2 weeks, may be given for rapid resolution. Chlorpheniramine, a first-generation oral antihistamine, or second-generation non-sedating antihistamine such as loratadine and cetirizine may be helpful to control pruritus. Early delivery to end symptom is rarely, if ever, necessary. Now let's talk about atopic eruption of pregnancy. Atopic eruption of pregnancy is defined as either an exacerbation or the first occurrence of eczematous or papular skin changes during pregnancy in an atopic individual. As the majority of the patients belong to the second group, that is, the first occurrence of the eczematous or papular skin changes, the atopic link is often overlooked, leading to a number of different diagnoses as evidenced by many synonyms. 20% of the patients suffer from an exacerbation of pre-existing atopic eczema with typical clinical picture. The remaining 80% experiences atopic skin changes for the first time ever or after a long remission, for example since childhood. Atopic eruption of pregnancy is the most common disorder among the pregnant women with pruritus. Why the term atopic eruption of pregnancy was introduced? A retrospective study of over 500 pregnant women with pruritus demonstrated considerable overlap in the clinical presentation and histopathology between pregnant women with atopic eczema, prurigo of pregnancy, and pruritic folliculitis of pregnancy. This led to the disorders being grouped together under the term of atopic eruption of pregnancy. So the term atopic eruption of pregnancy includes atopic eczema, prurigo of pregnancy, and pruritic folliculitis of pregnancy. However, not all the experts agree that the pruritic folliculitis of pregnancy and prurigo of the pregnancy are best lumped within a disorder of atopic diathesis. Atopic eruption of pregnancy is associated with personal or family history of atopy, such as seasonal rhinitis, asthma, or atopic dermatitis, and is in most cases the first manifestation of atopic skin changes. Why certain pregnant women develop atopic eruption of pregnancy? To prevent the fetal rejection, a normal pregnancy is characterized by a lack of strong maternal cell-mediated immune function and reduced Th1 cytokine production, as well as dominant humoral immune response with an increased Th2 cytokine production. This natural switch towards a dominant Th2 response, which worsens the imbalance already present in most atopic patients, is thought to favor the development of atopic eruption of pregnancy. In contrast to other specific dermatoses of pregnancy, such as pemphigoid gestationis and polymorphic eruption of pregnancy, atopic eruption of pregnancy appears earlier, often during the first trimester, with 75% of the patients presenting before the third trimester. Like I said before, that the atopic eruption of pregnancy is basically a group that was previously three diseases: atopic eczema, prurigo of pregnancy, and pruritic folliculitis of pregnancy. Hence, the clinical representation of atopic eruption of pregnancy is also of three types: E-type, eczema type, P-type, prurigo type, and pruritic folliculitis of pregnancy. I'll discuss about each one of them in detail. The vast majority of the patients with atopic eczema of pregnancy present with a widespread eczematous eruption, the E-type atopic eruption of pregnancy, involving the face, neck, and flexure areas similar to the classic atopic dermatitis. However, any area of the skin may be affected. Lesions may be eczematous patches or intact or excoriated papules. Papules can be follicle-based, grouped, or scattered. Skin dryness, which may be swear, is invariably present. A less common presentation of atopic eruption of pregnancy is prurigo of pregnancy, also called as P-type atopic eruption of pregnancy, which presents with erythematous excoriated nodules or papules on the extensor surfaces of the limbs and trunk. Lesions are grouped and may be crusted or appear eczematous. The eruption usually resolves in the immediate postpartum period, although it can persist up to 3 months. In rare cases, atopic eruption of pregnancy present as follicular papulopustules, formerly called as the pruritic folliculitis of pregnancy. Scattered follicular-based papules and pustules appear initially on the abdomen but may spread to the trunk and extremities and become generalized. The appearance is similar to that of steroid-induced acne and is only mildly pruritic. Recurrences in the subsequent pregnancies are common. There is no fetal risk, however, there is a high chance of developing atopic eczema in the child later in life. Fetal and maternal prognosis is generally excellent. What will you see on histopathology in atopic eczema of pregnancy? Well, it depends upon the stage of the lesion. Histological features can vary. Epidermal changes include the changes of the eczema, which are spongiosis and acanthosis. There can be erosions. The dermal infiltrate is composed of lymphocytes and usually admixed with eosinophils. If the histological section includes a hair follicle, there may be sterile follicular inflammation. Direct immunofluorescence is negative. Serum IgE levels may be elevated in up to 70% of the patients, usually to a mild degree. Differential diagnoses include polymorphic eruption of pregnancy and intrahepatic cholestasis of the pregnancy, and they particularly need to be excluded. In atopic eruption of pregnancy, the eruption starts significantly earlier during gestation and has no association with the stria. Serum bile acids are also normal. Clinically, the eczema type atopic eruption of pregnancy can be differentiated from the polymorphic eruption of pregnancy and early pemphigoid gestationis by its earlier onset. predilection for the involvement of the skin flexures, and absence of urticarial plaques on the abdomen. The clinical differentiation of prurigo type of atopic eruption of pregnancy from the polymorphic eruption of pregnancy or early pemphigoid gestationis may be difficult. In these cases, a skin biopsy may be helpful for the correct diagnosis. Although prurigo type atopic eruption of pregnancy and polymorphic eruption of pregnancy share several histopathological features, the finding of lymphocytic vasculitis, eosinophils in the interstitial dermis, edema, and mucin deposition in the dermis supports the diagnosis of polymorphic eruption of pregnancy rather than the atopic eczema of pregnancy. Furthermore, other pruritic dermatosis not specifically associated with pregnancy, example scabies and viral exanthem drug eruptions, must be considered. Now let's talk about treatment of atopic eruption of pregnancy. Cutaneous lesions respond rapidly to topical corticosteroids with or without systemic antihistamines. Emollients, humectants, and topical antipruritic agents also play a role as they do in non-pregnant patients with atopic dermatitis. Topical urea 10%, polidocanol, and menthol are considered safe during pregnancy. UVB radiation is very helpful for Swyer disease. Secondary bacterial infections may require systemic antibiotics, for example penicillins and cephalosporins. Now let's talk about the group where no primary skin lesions are seen. Intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. First of all, we all should know what is intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. It is a rare form of genetically linked, hormone-dependent, reversible cholestasis. It typically presents late during pregnancy with dramatic pruritus. Although maternal prognosis is usually good, fetal risk is significant, and that's why it's very important to recognize intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. Why do some women develop intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy? The key element is the reduced excretion of bile acid, which leads to the increased accumulation of bile acid in the serum. This not only provokes Swyer pruritus in the mother, but may also have deleterious effect on the fetus. Toxic bile acids cross the placenta and can lead to acute fetal anoxia due to the abnormal uterine contractions and vasoconstriction of chorionic veins, as well as impaired fetal cardiomyocyte function. Why the reduced excretion of bile acids occur? One predisposing factor is the mutation in the gene called as ABCB4 gene that encodes bile transporter protein. While mild dysfunction of these canalicular transporters may not lead to the clinical symptoms in non-pregnant individuals, when the transporter's capacity to secrete substrates is exceeded, as occurs in the setting of high level of sex hormones during pregnancy, signs and symptoms of cholestasis may develop. Other contributing factors are cholestatic effect of the estrogen and progesterone metabolites. Several dietary factors such as selenium deficiency and decreased level of vitamin D have also been suggested in the pathogenesis of intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. Previous history of hepatitis C also predisposed to the development of the intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. Now, how do patients with intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy present? Patients typically present during their last trimester with a sudden onset of intense generalized pruritus that often starts on the palms and sole. No primary skin lesions are seen, and secondary changes due to scratching vary from subtle excoriations early on to pronounced prurigo nodularis in those with pruritus of longer duration. The extensive surfaces of extremities, buttocks, and abdomen are usually severely infected. Although jaundice is often mentioned as a common finding in intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy, it occurs only in 10% of patients. Jaundice is usually a complication in those with the most severe and prolonged episodes of intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. In such patients, concomitant extrahepatic cholestasis may be associated with steatorrhea and subsequent vitamin K deficiency, leading to an increased risk of intra and postpartum hemorrhage. Recurrence during subsequent pregnancy occurs in 45 to 70% of the patients. Recurrences with oral contraceptives is routine. No detectable abnormalities are generally present between the gestation. Intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy is associated with significant fetal risk. In particular, an increase in premature birth 20 to 60% of the time, intrapartum fetal distress 20 to 30% of time, and fetal loss 1 to 2%. Fetal risk correlates with the elevation in the serum bile acids, especially when levels exceed greater than 40 micromole per liter. Thus, prompt diagnosis and treatment is essential. Histological findings in the skin and liver are non-specific, and direct immunofluorescence of perilesional skin is negative. How is intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy diagnosed? The diagnosis is confirmed by an increased level of total serum bile acid levels greater than 11 micromole in a pregnant woman. Normal range is between 0 to 6 micromole per liter. Levels may range from 3 to 100 times normal. Serum levels of transaminases are usually elevated in those with intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy, but may be normal in 30% of the patients. Hence, a physician should not rely on LFTs, that is, transaminases alone, to diagnose intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy, and serum bile acid levels should be checked. During pregnancy, alkaline phosphatase typically increases from placental origin, even in the absence of intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. Hence, cannot be used to check for cholestasis in pregnancy. Gamma-glutamyl transferase levels are usually lower than that in the non-pregnant woman. Conjugated direct bilirubin levels are increased in the woman with jaundice, and prothrombin time may be prolonged. Hepatic ultrasonography generally is normal, but may reveal gallstone in jaundiced patients. Now let's talk about some of the differentials of intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. In the absence of primary lesions, the clinical differential diagnoses include other causes of primary pruritus, including those that lead to cholestatic picture. Viral hepatitis is a common disorder and should be excluded by appropriate serologies. How would you treat a woman with intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy? Since fetal prognosis correlates with the disease severity, the therapeutic goal is the reduction of serum bile acids. This allows prolongation of pregnancy and lessens both fetal risk and maternal symptoms. To date, the only successful agent has been oral ursodeoxycholic acid. It is a naturally occurring hydrophilic, non-toxic bile acid that has been used for a variety of cholestatic liver diseases. Although its exact mechanism of action in intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy is still not fully understood, there is evidence that ursodeoxycholic acid corrects the maternal serum bile acid profile, decreases the passage of bile acid to the fetoplacental unit, and improves the function of bile acid transport system. Ursodeoxycholic acid is safe for mother and fetus, with its only side effect being mild diarrhea. Use of ursodeoxycholic acid for intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy is off-label, and it is only approved for primary biliary cirrhosis. The recommended oral dose is 15 mg per kg per daily, or independent of the body weight 1 gram daily. It should be started as early as possible and administered until delivery. Histamine is contraindicated in pregnancy as it can further reduce vitamin K absorption and increase the risk of bleeding. In jaundiced patients, the prothrombin time should be monitored and intramuscular vitamin K administered as early as possible. In addition to the treatment with ursodeoxycholic acid, close monitoring of the fetal heart rate is required from 34th week of gestation onwards. Early delivery, that is, as soon as the fetal lung maturity is achieved at 36 to 37 week, is recommended by several authors. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to get notification. Also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Namra Aziz. See you guys soon with a new exciting video.